Welcome traveller to Medieval Screen Finds, a quiet corner of the internet where we explore history, a chill space where the echoes of the past gently guides you toward a peaceful time. Tonight, our journey takes us to the bustling, yet often overlooked, towns of the medieval world. A world shaped by unseen forces, by structures of power and protection that govern the lives of ordinary people, yet remain largely hidden from our modern gaze. We will gently uncover the secrets of the medieval guilds, those powerful associations that rose from the very dust of the marketplace to weave a complex tapestry of urban life. Allow your mind to wander, to gently unfurl like an ancient map, as we explore their influence, their hidden rituals, their struggles, and their enduring legacy. There is no need to grasp at every detail. Simply let the rhythm of the past lull you, inviting a peaceful descent into quiet understanding and perhaps into tranquil sleep. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to Medieval Screen Finds to get more boring sleep videos, but only if these videos truly brings you rest. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's comforting seeing all the places where these calm historical stories reach. Imagine yourself, if you will, standing on the edge of a burgeoning medieval town, perhaps in the 12th or 13th century. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, damp earth after a recent rain, and the distant, subtle aroma of baking bread. Around you, wooden structures rise, close packed, their upper stories sometimes leaning out precariously over the narrow, winding streets. This is a time of profound change, a slow, inexorable shift in the very foundations of society. For centuries, the rhythms of life had been largely dictated by the feudal system. Lords held vast tracts of land, and the majority of people, the peasants, were bound to the soil, their lives intertwined with the cycles of planting and harvest. Their world was one of manors and scattered villages, of allegiances sworn to a local noble, and of justice meted out from the Lord's hall. The grand castles, symbols of feudal might, loomed over the landscape, asserting their dominance. Yet, as the centuries turned, a new kind of power began to emerge, not from the fortified keeps of the nobility, but from the muddy tracks and burgeoning markets of the towns. The decline of feudal power was not a dramatic collapse, but a gradual, almost imperceptible ebbing away of influence, particularly in matters of commerce and daily life beyond the agricultural sphere. As trade routes slowly reopened following the earlier, more turbulent centuries, and as populations began to recover and grow, the stagnant economy of the feudal manor proved increasingly insufficient. People were beginning to specialize, to craft goods, to buy and sell. And where there is trade, there is a need for order, for regulation, for protection. Elements that the traditional feudal lords, often focused on their land and their martial obligations, were not always equipped to provide for these new urban centers. The towns, often growing organically around a natural harbour, a crossroads, or the protective walls of an existing castle, became magnets for those seeking a different way of life, a chance to ply a trade, to escape the strictures of the manor. Picture these early towns, a bustling hub of activity where merchants spread their wares on makeshift stalls, and craftsmen, perhaps a weaver or a tanner, worked diligently in their small, often humble workshops. As more people congregated, the need for a shared sense of purpose, for collective security, became apparent. Who would ensure fair prices? Who would protect against unscrupulous traders or roving bandits? Who would arbitrate disputes among those who lived by their craft? From this fertile ground of necessity, the guilds began to sprout, quietly, almost intuitively, as alliances of craftsmen and merchants who understood that there was strength in numbers and a profound comfort in mutual support. These were not grand, imposing institutions at first, but rather informal associations, growing from the shared daily struggles and aspirations of individuals. Imagine a group of carpenters, perhaps, meeting after a long day's work, discussing the quality of wood, the challenges of finding apprentices, or the unfair practices of a rival craftsman who might be undercutting prices with shoddy work. From these conversations, a sense of common interest would coalesce. They would begin to agree on certain standards, on ways to protect their livelihoods. This was the genesis of the Guild, a practical response to the emergent complexities of urban life. The concept of a brotherhood of trade was central to the early appeal of the guilds. In a world that could be harsh and unpredictable, where famine, disease, and conflict were ever-present shadows, belonging to a guild offered a profound sense of security and community. If a craftsman fell ill, his guild brothers might provide for his family. If a widow was left with no means of support, the guild might offer assistance. If a member was wronged, the collective weight of the guild could be brought to bear to seek justice. This was not just about economic advantage. It was about social cohesion, a vital safety net in turbulent times. Imagine the comfort of knowing that you were not alone, that a network of individuals, bound by common craft and common purpose, stood with you. As these nascent guilds gained influence and demonstrated their ability to maintain order and facilitate trade, they began to seek formal recognition. This often came in the form of charters and privileges granted by kings, princes, or powerful lords. These charters were not merely symbolic documents, they were powerful legal instruments that bestowed upon the guilds specific rights and protections. They might grant a monopoly over a particular trade within a town, meaning that only guild members could legally practice that craft. They might allow the guild to establish its own courts to settle disputes among its members, or to levy fines for infractions. These privileges were highly coveted, for they cemented the guild's position as a legitimate and influential force within the urban landscape. Consider the significance of such a charter. For a group of weavers, for instance, a royal charter meant that they could regulate the production and sale of cloth, ensuring quality, setting fair prices, and preventing outsiders from undermining their market. It was a shield against competition from those who might not adhere to the same standards, and a sword to enforce their rights within the town. The guild hall, once perhaps a rented room, might now become a dedicated building, a symbol of their newfound status and collective strength. The sound of hammers from a blacksmith's forge, the rhythmic thud of a weaver's loom, the quiet murmur of merchants haggling in the marketplace. These were the sounds of a new order taking shape, an order that was largely self-governed, rooted in the collective power of those who worked with their hands and their minds. The relationship between the emerging towns, the traditional feudal powers, and the burgeoning guilds was a delicate dance. Lords recognized the economic benefits that prosperous towns brought: taxes, skilled labor, and a burgeoning mercantile class. In return for these benefits, they were often willing to grant the guilds the autonomy they desired. This was a pragmatic alliance, driven by mutual interest, that slowly but surely shifted the balance of power from the scattered manors to the vibrant, growing urban centers. The very landscape of power was subtly but profoundly being redrawn. So, as the medieval centuries unfolded, the guilds transformed from informal gatherings into highly structured, powerful organizations. They were the architects of urban economies, the guardians of quality, and the providers of social welfare. They brought order to what might otherwise have been chaos, and they offered a profound sense of belonging in a world that could often feel isolating. Their rise was a testament to the ingenuity and cooperative spirit of ordinary people, carving out a new path, a new order, in the heart of the medieval town. And with this new order came a distinct way of life, a system of learning and progression that defined the very existence of those who sought to master a craft. We will delve deeper into that structured existence, the path from eager apprentice to respected master in our next segment. As we journey deeper into the heart of the medieval guild, let us turn our attention to the very fabric of its existence, the individuals who comprised it, and the structured path that governed their lives within its embrace. The guild was not merely an economic entity, it was a social hierarchy, a school, and often a second family. At its core was a carefully defined progression, a ladder that every aspiring craftsman or merchant had to ascend, from the eager, often bewildered apprentice through the testing years of the journeyman to the ultimate coveted status of master. This was a world built on patience, dedication, and the transmission of skill from one generation to the next. Imagine, if you will, a young boy, perhaps 7 or 10 years old, standing nervously at the threshold of a master craftsman's workshop. His heart might be aflutter with a mix of apprehension and excitement. This was often the apprentice's start. He would be leaving his family home, perhaps for the first time, to live and learn under the direct tutelage of a master, becoming an integral, albeit junior member of the master's household. This was a long-term commitment, often for 7 years or more, sometimes even longer, depending on the complexity of the craft. For these years, the master would provide food, lodging, clothing, and most crucially, instruction in the mysteries and intricacies of his trade. The apprentice's days would be long, beginning before dawn and ending long after dusk. He would sweep the workshop, fetch water, prepare materials, run errands, and slowly, painstakingly, learn the fundamental skills of the craft. Consider the atmosphere within such a workshop. The scent of fresh-cut timber might mingle with the tang of metal, or the earthy smell of clay, depending on the trade. The rhythmic sounds of work would fill the air, the precise tap-tap-tap of a hammer, the whisper of a brush on canvas, the steady whir of a potter's wheel. The master, perhaps a grizzled veteran with calloused hands and keen eyes, would observe silently, occasionally offering a sharp correction or a word of encouragement. Learning was not always through explicit instruction. Often it was through observation, through imitation, through countless hours of repetitive tasks designed to build muscle memory and an intuitive understanding of the material. The apprentice would learn to identify the finest wool, to temper steel just so, to mix pigments to the perfect shade, to recognize the subtle flaws in a piece of leather. It was a rigorous, immersive education designed to instill not just technical skill, but also discipline, perseverance, and a deep respect for the craft itself. Life for an apprentice was not all toil, however. They were part of the master's household, sharing meals, attending church, and participating in the rhythms of daily family life. While their status was low and tasks often menial, they were, in a sense, adopted into a new family. This familial aspect reinforced the bonds within the guild, creating a sense of shared experience that transcended the simple economic relationship. They might play games with the master's children, listen to stories by the fire in the evenings, or attend local festivals with the household. These informal moments, alongside the demanding work, shaped the young apprentice, teaching them not only a trade, but also the social customs and expectations of their new community within the guild. Upon completion of his apprenticeship, typically marked by a formal ceremony or the presentation of a masterpiece, a term we will return to, the apprentice would shed his junior status and become a journeyman. This was a significant transition, marking the acquisition of foundational skills and the right to earn wages for his labour. The journeyman's travels were a crucial stage in this progression, a period of broadening horizons and refining expertise. It was common, even expected, for journeymen to leave their initial master's workshop and travel between towns, working for different masters in different places. Imagine the journeyman, perhaps with a small pack on his back and a few coins in his purse, setting out on the road. The motivations for these travels were manifold. Firstly, it offered an opportunity to learn new techniques, to observe different styles, and to encounter new challenges that would further hone their skills. A journeyman weaver from Flanders might travel to Italy to learn about different dye processes, or a stonemason from France might seek work on a grand cathedral being built in England, observing new architectural approaches. Secondly, it was a way to gain experience in a variety of settings, exposing them to different demands and expectations within the same craft. This period of travel also served a social purpose. It introduced the journeyman to a wider network of fellow craftsmen, fostering connections that could be valuable later in life. The life of a journeyman, while offering newfound freedom and the dignity of earned wages, was not without its own set of challenges. They were often transient, moving from place to place, seeking work, sometimes facing lean times. They might lodge in communal houses or in small rooms provided by their temporary masters. Yet, the pursuit of mastery, the deep desire to perfect their craft, was a powerful driving force. The journey itself was part of the education, shaping not just their technical abilities, but also their character, instilling adaptability and resilience. The stories they gathered, the techniques they absorbed, and the insights they gained during these travels would all contribute to their eventual bid for master status. The culmination of this arduous journey was the master's privilege. To become a master, a journeyman had to demonstrate not only exceptional skill, but also adherence to the guild's strict standards and moral code. The path to becoming a master was often rigorous and multifaceted. First, the journeyman would typically need to submit a masterpiece, a complex, often elaborate piece of work that showcased their complete command of the craft. For a painter, this might be a detailed altarpiece. For a goldsmith, an intricate piece of jewellery. For a baker, a particularly challenging loaf or pastry. This masterpiece would be judged by a committee of existing masters who would scrutinise every detail, ensuring it met the highest possible standards of quality and artistry. Beyond the masterpiece, there were often other requirements. A journeyman might need to demonstrate that he had sufficient capital to set up his own workshop, to purchase tools and materials, and to support apprentices. He might also be required to pay a substantial fee to the guild, a testament to its exclusivity and the value placed on master status. Finally, there was often a formal examination, sometimes oral, where the aspiring master would be questioned on his knowledge of the trade's history, its ethics, and its established practices. Only upon successful completion of all these requirements, and often after a solemn oath to uphold the guild's rules and traditions, would the journeyman be admitted into the ranks of the masters. This was a moment of immense pride, signifying not just economic independence but also social recognition and acceptance into the inner circle of the guild. Once a master, an individual could open his own workshop, take on apprentices, and enjoy the full benefits and responsibilities of guild membership. The master was not just a skilled craftsman, he was an entrepreneur, an educator, and a pillar of the community. His workshop became a hub of activity, a place where knowledge was transmitted, goods were produced, and livelihoods were forged. The family of the guild extended far beyond the immediate household of the master. It was a network of mutual support that encompassed all members, from the newest apprentice to the most venerable master. Guilds often maintained common funds, built up from membership fees and fines, which were used to provide charity and assistance to members in need. Imagine a scenario where a master falls ill and can no longer work. The guild might provide financial aid to his family. If a member passed away, the guild would often arrange for his burial and support his widow and orphaned children. This was a vital form of social security, long before the concept of state welfare existed. Guilds also fostered a sense of camaraderie through shared religious observances and social events. Many guilds had patron saints, and guild members would participate together in religious processions and feast days. They would hold elaborate banquets and celebrations, strengthening the bonds of brotherhood. These gatherings were not just opportunities for revelry. They reinforced the collective identity of the guild, reminding each member that they were part of something larger than themselves. The shared experiences, the collective support in times of hardship, and the communal celebrations all contributed to a profound sense of belonging. The guild was, in many ways, an extended family, providing comfort and stability in an often unpredictable world. This intricate structure, from the humble apprentice to the esteemed master, was not merely a system of production. It was a deeply ingrained social and cultural institution that shaped lives, ensured quality, and, as we shall see, wielded considerable power within the medieval town. The quiet sounds of their daily work, the unseen hands meticulously shaping raw materials, the subtle passing of knowledge from elder to youth, all contributed to the enduring legacy of these powerful brotherhoods. Having explored the internal structure and life within the medieval guild, let us now turn our attention to the formidable power they wielded, not just within their own ranks, but throughout the entire urban landscape. Guilds were far more than mere associations of craftsmen. They were vital engines of their local economies, formidable protectors of their members' interests, and increasingly significant political forces. Their influence stemmed from a carefully constructed system designed to ensure quality, control markets, and maintain their unique position within society. One of the most fundamental aspects of guild power was their role as guardians of quality. In an age before standardized manufacturing and widespread consumer protection laws, the guild served as the primary guarantor of good workmanship and honest trade. Imagine a customer in a medieval market seeking to purchase a fine piece of cloth or a sturdy pair of shoes. How could they be assured of the product's quality, durability, and fair price? The guild provided that assurance. They established and rigorously enforced strict rules for every stage of production. For a baker, this might mean regulations on the type of flour used, the size and weight of a loaf, and the method of baking. For a goldsmith, it would involve meticulous standards for the purity of metals and the intricacy of design. Consider the implications of these quality controls. Guilds often had designated officials, sometimes called searchers or viewers, who would regularly inspect workshops, examine goods, and even confiscate shoddy products. If a craftsman was found to be cutting corners, using inferior materials, or attempting to defraud customers, he faced severe penalties, ranging from hefty fines to expulsion from the guild, which effectively meant the end of his livelihood within that town. This strict oversight was not just about protecting the consumer. It was also about protecting the reputation of the entire craft, and, by extension, the guild itself. A poor quality product from one guild member could tarnish the reputation of all, undermining public trust and diminishing the guild's collective standing. Thus, by maintaining high standards, guilds fostered public confidence, which in turn strengthened their monopoly and control over trade. Indeed, the control of markets was another cornerstone of guild power. Guilds effectively monopolized their respective trades within a town, meaning that only guild members were permitted to practice that craft or sell those specific goods. This monopoly was often enshrined in the charters granted by kings or lords, giving the guilds legal authority to exclude non-members. This control extended to regulating prices, setting wages for journeymen and apprentices, and managing competition. Imagine the power this afforded them. If a new, aspiring weaver sought to sell his cloth in a town, he would first have to gain admittance to the Weavers' Guild, subject himself to their rules, and contribute to their collective interests. This prevented outsiders from undercutting prices or flooding the market with unregulated goods, The guild's ability to set prices was a double-edged sword. While it prevented cutthroat competition that could drive down wages and quality, it also meant that prices for essential goods could be kept artificially high. However, the guilds often argued that fair prices were necessary to ensure a living wage for their members and to cover the costs of high-quality materials and skilled labour. Similarly, by regulating wages, they aimed to prevent exploitation of their journeymen and to maintain a stable economic environment for their members. This meticulous control over every aspect of their trade ensured their economic dominance and fostered a degree of stability in a volatile medieval economy. Beyond their economic might, guilds also exerted significant political influence. As towns grew in wealth and importance, they often gained a degree of self-governance, forming town councils or municipal governments. It was in these burgeoning civic bodies that the guilds truly made their political presence felt. Masters, often the wealthiest and most respected members of the community, frequently served on town councils, held mayoral positions, or acted as civic magistrates. Their collective voice carried considerable weight in decisions regarding trade regulations, taxation, infrastructure projects, and even military defense. Consider a scenario where a town council was debating the construction of a new bridge or the repair of city walls. The stonemasons' guild, the carpenters' guild, and the blacksmiths' guild would all have a vested interest, and their representatives on the council would lobby effectively for their members' involvement and fair compensation. This direct participation in civic decisions meant that guild interests were often intertwined with the broader welfare of the town. They contributed financially to public works, raised militias for defense, and helped maintain law and order, further cementing their indispensability to urban life. The sound of vigorous debate in a guild hall, or the murmurs of agreement in a town council meeting, would often precede decisions that shaped the very lives of the town's inhabitants. Finally, the guilds were not solely focused on economic and political power. They also played a crucial role in the social and cultural life of the community. They provided charity and hosted public celebrations that reinforced their status and fostered community cohesion. Guilds often maintained almshouses for elderly or impoverished members, provided dowries for the daughters of deceased members, and offered support to widows and orphans. This charitable work was a visible manifestation of their brotherhood of trade ethos, demonstrating their commitment to the welfare of their members beyond just their working lives. Moreover, guild festivals and pageants were often highlights of the medieval calendar. Imagine a grand procession on the feast day of a guild's patron saint, with members dressed in their finest attire, carrying banners emblazoned with their unique emblems, and parading through the town streets. These events were not just religious observances, they were public displays of the guild's wealth, power, and prestige. They fostered civic pride, entertained the populace, and subtly reinforced the social hierarchy with the guilds at its very heart. The vibrant colours of their banners, the gleam of polished tools carried aloft, the proud measured steps of the masters, all contributed to a spectacle that reaffirmed their importance to the medieval urban tapestry. In essence, the power of the medieval guilds was a multifaceted jewel, gleaming with economic control, political influence, and social prominence. They were the arbiters of quality, the regulators of commerce, and often the de facto governors of their towns. They created a structured, secure, and often prosperous environment for their members, ensuring a consistent standard of living and a collective voice in a world that was still largely dominated by feudal lords. The steady hum of their collective endeavours, the meticulous adherence to their rules, and the quiet assertion of their authority were the very foundations upon which much of medieval urban society was built. However, such concentrated power, while beneficial in many ways, inevitably led to friction, both within the towns and between the guilds themselves. It is to these tensions and rivalries that we will turn our attention next. While the medieval guilds were powerful bastions of order and mutual support, their very strength and the monopolies they held inevitably led to friction, competition, and sometimes outright conflict. The streets of a bustling medieval town, though seemingly orderly, often concealed a simmering tension beneath the surface, a silent struggle for dominance between rival guilds. These were not always grand, bloody wars of conquest, but rather a series of petty wars, disputes and clashes that could range from heated arguments and economic sabotage to actual street brawls. Trade disputes were a frequent catalyst for these rivalries. Guilds were fiercely protective of their established rights and privileges, especially regarding the goods they were permitted to sell or the marketplaces they controlled. Imagine the friction that might arise if the Guild of Cordwainers, who made shoes, felt that the Guild of Cobblers, who repaired them, were encroaching upon their territory by manufacturing new footwear. Or consider the disputes between different merchant guilds over access to lucrative trade routes or the right to import specific commodities. Each guild sought to expand its influence and secure its economic advantage, often at the expense of another. These disagreements could escalate quickly, moving from formal complaints lodged with the town council to more direct, often aggressive actions. The guild charters, while granting specific rights, were sometimes vaguely worded, leading to differing interpretations and ongoing contention. For example, a charter might grant a particular guild the exclusive right to sell finished cloth. But what constituted finished? Could a fuller's guild, responsible for cleaning and thickening cloth, argue that their process made the cloth finished, thereby allowing them to sell it directly and bypass the weaver's guild? Such ambiguities were ripe for exploitation and often led to protracted legal battles within the town's courts, or, more often, to informal but intense pressure campaigns. The quiet murmur of negotiations in a town hall, or the rustle of legal documents, could hide deep-seated animosity. When formal channels failed to resolve these trade disputes, the rivalries could spill out into more direct and less savoury forms: street fights and acts of sabotage. While the historical records do not dwell on the gruesome details, it is clear that brawls between guild members were not uncommon. Imagine the apprentices and journeymen, perhaps fueled by drink and loyalty to their respective guilds, clashing in the narrow, winding streets after a market day. A shove could turn into a punch, a heated exchange into a full-blown melee, as loyalties were tested and insults exchanged. These were not always to the death battles, but often brutal, chaotic encounters involving fists, staves, or whatever makeshift weapons came to hand. The shouts, the thud of bodies, the panicked cries of onlookers, these were the sounds of guild rivalry erupting into raw physical confrontation. Beyond direct physical violence, subtle acts of sabotage were also employed. This could manifest in various ways. A rival guild might spread rumours about the quality of another's goods, attempt to steal their trade secrets, or even damage their property under the cover of darkness. Imagine a master baker finding his ovens mysteriously clogged with ash, or a weaver discovering that his valuable threads have been deliberately tangled and ruined overnight. These acts, though seemingly petty, could have significant economic consequences for the targeted guild, disrupting production, costing money, and undermining their reputation. The motive was clear: to undermine the competition and assert dominance. The whispered accusations, the suspicious glances, the quiet acts of malice, these were the undercurrents of guild conflict. In the face of common threats or particularly strong rivals, some guilds found it expedient to form alliances. These were often temporary unions, forged out of necessity, to present a united front against a shared enemy. For instance, Several smaller craft guilds might band together against a dominant merchant guild that they perceived as exploiting them through unfair pricing or restrictive trade practices. Or, within a town where a powerful lord was attempting to curb guild autonomy, various guilds might unite their resources and political influence to resist his encroachments. These alliances were pragmatic rather than sentimental. They were built on shared interests and the understanding that collective action could be more effective than individual struggles. Imagine the discussions in dimly lit rooms where leaders of different guilds, perhaps usually wary of each other, would come together to forge a common strategy, pooling their resources and intelligence to counter a larger threat. The quiet deliberation, the measured promises, the tentative agreements, these were the sounds of strategic alliances being formed. However, the pursuit of power, even through alliances, came at a price. The intense competition and internal conflicts within the guild system could divide communities as much as they unified them. While guilds provided a strong sense of belonging for their members, they often fostered an us versus them mentality towards those outside their particular fraternity. This could lead to social stratification, where certain powerful guilds, like the wealthy merchant guilds, held disproportionate influence over the town's affairs, sometimes marginalizing smaller crafts or those who remained outside the guild system. The pride in one's guild, while a source of strength, could also become a source of narrow-mindedness and exclusion. Moreover, the constant threat of inter-guild conflict meant that resources, both financial and human, that could have been used for the betterment of the entire community, were often diverted to internal squabbles. Legal fees, security measures, and the costs associated with acts of sabotage or retaliatory actions all drained resources that might otherwise have been invested in public works, charity for the general populace, or broader economic development. The tension, though often unspoken, would be a constant presence, a low thrum beneath the surface of daily life. These rivalries also had a significant impact on urban governance. Town councils, often composed of guildmasters, could become arenas for guild disputes, with different factions lobbying fiercely for their own interests. Decisions that affected the entire town could be delayed or distorted by the underlying animosities between powerful guild representatives. While the ideal was a harmonious civic body working for the common good, the reality was often a complex web of competing guild agendas. The polite but firm disagreements, the carefully worded objections, the subtle maneuvering for advantage, these were the unspoken languages of political guild conflict. Despite their internal conflicts, the very existence of these rivalries underscores the immense power and significance of the guilds within medieval urban life. They were not monolithic entities, but dynamic, often contentious, organizations that reflected the competitive spirit of the age. Their clashes, whether economic or physical, were a testament to the high stakes involved in controlling trade and influence in a rapidly developing world. The quiet resentment, the simmering ambition, the occasional eruption of hostility, these were the unavoidable shadows cast by the bright light of guild prosperity and power. As we move on, we will explore the more hidden, esoteric aspects of these brotherhoods, delving into their secrets, rituals, and symbols that bound their members in profound and often mysterious ways. Beyond the overt displays of economic power and political influence, the medieval guilds harbored a deeper, more mysterious dimension, a hidden life woven with oaths, rituals, and symbols. These elements were not merely ceremonial. They were integral to fostering loyalty, maintaining exclusivity, and transmitting the esoteric knowledge that defined each craft. To be a member of a guild was to be initiated into a brotherhood with its own unique customs, its own secret language, and its own sacred spaces. Central to this hidden life were the solemn oaths of loyalty that members took upon their admission. These vows were not taken lightly. In a deeply religious age, an oath sworn before God carried immense weight and consequence. Imagine the scene. A new member standing before the assembled masters, perhaps in the dimly lit hall of the guild, hands placed on a sacred text or relic. He would pledge allegiance not only to the guild's rules and its collective good, but also to protect its secrets and interests. This oath bound him to his fellow members in a profound, almost spiritual covenant. It instilled a sense of shared responsibility and mutual trust, ensuring that sensitive trade practices, proprietary techniques, or internal deliberations remained within the guild's confines. The very act of swearing such an oath created an unshakable bond, forging a collective identity that transcended individual ambition. The low, serious tone of the words spoken, the hushed responses from the assembled members, these were the sounds of commitment being solidified. To further reinforce this exclusivity and allow members to identify one another, especially when travelling between towns, guilds often employed secret signs and handshakes. These subtle methods of recognition served as a form of authentication, assuring members that they were among their own, even in unfamiliar places. Imagine a journeyman arriving in a new city, seeking work. A specific gesture, a particular grip of the hand, or a whispered phrase, known only to the initiated, could open doors and grant access to the guild's network of support and employment. These hidden forms of communication fostered a powerful sense of camaraderie and trust, distinguishing true members from imposters or unauthorized craftsmen. The quiet precision of these gestures, the momentary pause of recognition, the subtle shift in demeanor, these were the silent languages of belonging. The physical embodiment of guild pride and identity was often found in their guild halls and emblems. The guild hall was more than just a meeting place. It was the heart of the guild's communal life. These buildings, often grand and elaborately decorated, were a testament to the guild's wealth, power, and enduring presence in the town. Imagine a guild hall with stained glass windows depicting the tools of the trade, or walls adorned with portraits of past masters. Within its sturdy walls, masters convened to deliberate, apprentices received their instruction, and members gathered for feasts and celebrations. It was a space that radiated authority and tradition. Each guild also possessed its unique emblems, symbols that visually represented their craft and their collective identity. A baker's guild might display a sheaf of wheat and an oven, a blacksmith's guild, an anvil and hammer, a tailor's guild, a pair of shears. These emblems were proudly displayed on banners carried in processions, carved into the facades of guild halls, or stamped onto guild-produced goods as a mark of quality and origin. These symbols acted as powerful visual shorthand, instantly recognizable to both members and the wider public, reinforcing the guild's presence and prestige within the community. The sturdy stone of the hall, the vibrant colours of the banners, the intricate carvings of their symbols, these were the enduring visual statements of guild identity. The journey to master status, as we discussed earlier, was often marked by elaborate rites of passage. These initiation ceremonies and tests of skill were deeply symbolic, transforming a journeyman into a full-fledged master. Beyond the practical demonstration of a masterpiece, the ceremonies often involved symbolic acts that underscored the candidate's understanding of the guild's traditions, ethics, and hidden knowledge. Imagine a ceremony where the aspiring master, after presenting his magnificent work, undergoes a symbolic purification or takes a final, secret oath. He might be presented with the special tools of the master or a symbolic key to the guild's knowledge. These rites were designed to impress upon the new master the solemnity of his new role and his responsibility to uphold the guild's standards and secrets. They served as a profound psychological transition, marking the elevation from learner to teacher, from follower to leader. The hushed reverence of the onlookers The deliberate movements of the masters conducting the ceremony, the quiet pride in the new master's eyes, these were the emotional textures of these significant transitions. The hidden life of the guild, therefore, was not merely about secrecy for its own sake. It was a sophisticated system for preserving the integrity of the craft, fostering unwavering loyalty among its members, and maintaining its privileged status in a competitive world. These oaths, signs, symbols, and rituals created an almost mystical aura around the guilds, deepening the bonds between members and commanding respect, and perhaps a touch of awe from those outside. They were the invisible threads that wove the fabric of the guild even tighter, ensuring its continuity and its power across generations. This intricate tapestry of open influence and hidden knowledge made the guilds truly formidable forces in the medieval urban landscape. However, no institution, no matter how powerful, is immune to the forces of change, and the medieval guilds, too, would eventually face their decline. We will explore this gradual fading of their influence and the lasting mark they left on history in our concluding segment. As the centuries turned, and the vibrant tapestry of the medieval world began to transform into the nascent patterns of modernity, even the most powerful and entrenched institutions faced the relentless march of change. The medieval guilds, once the undisputed arbiters of urban life and trade, found their influence gradually waning, their monopolies challenged, and their very existence questioned. Their decline was not a sudden collapse, but a long, drawn-out process, a slow erosion of their power driven by evolving economies and the rise of new political forces. One of the primary drivers of this decline was the emergence of new economic models and the consolidation of royal power. As nation-states began to solidify and monarchs asserted greater control over their realms, the decentralized power of the guilds, once a pragmatic necessity, became an obstacle to central authority. Kings and princes sought to establish uniform laws and regulations across their territories, and the guild's local monopolies and autonomous jurisdictions often conflicted with this vision. The gradual shift from a largely localized, town-based economy to a more expansive, national and even international one also undermined the guild system. Large-scale merchants and early industrialists, often backed by royal favour, began to operate outside the strictures of guild control, establishing factories and trading networks that bypassed traditional urban markets. These new economic players, unburdened by guild regulations, could produce goods more cheaply and efficiently, slowly eroding the guild's competitive edge. The rise of free trade was a significant conceptual shift that directly challenged the guild system. Guild restrictions, which once protected quality and ensured fair practices, gradually came to be seen as impediments to economic progress and innovation. Critics argued that guild monopolies stifled competition, raised prices for consumers, and prevented new ideas and methods from flourishing. The emphasis shifted from the controlled, communal production of the guilds to the open, competitive dynamics of a free market. Imagine the philosophical debates brewing in coffeehouses or intellectual salons, where thinkers championed individual liberty and the unfettered flow of goods and services, directly contrasting with the rigid, regulated world of the guilds. The quiet arguments against their restrictions, the persuasive words advocating for economic freedom, these were the intellectual sounds that chipped away at the guild's foundations. Furthermore, the guild's own internal rigidities contributed to their eventual decline. Their strict rules regarding apprenticeship, mastership, and production methods, while once ensuring quality, often made them resistant to innovation and adaptation. As new technologies emerged and tastes shifted, some guilds struggled to keep pace. Their exclusivity also created resentment among those outside their privileged circles, leading to demands for greater economic freedom and access to trades. The very strength of their unity could become a weakness when faced with broad societal and economic shifts. Despite their eventual decline, the medieval guilds left an indelible mark on history, and their legacy can still be observed in various forms today. Perhaps most notably, many of the core principles of guild organization found a new expression in the development of modern trade unions and professional associations. The idea of collective bargaining, the pursuit of fair wages and working conditions, the emphasis on professional standards, and the provision of mutual support for members, all echo the fundamental tenets upon which the medieval guilds were built. Imagine the echoes of guild brotherhood in the early labour movements of the industrial age, as workers sought collective strength in the face of new economic challenges. The quiet solidarity, the shared goals, the organised demands, these were the modern reincarnations of ancient guild principles. Even in contemporary professional bodies, such as medical associations, bar associations, or engineering councils, one can discern the faint outlines of guild influence. These organisations often regulate entry into their professions, set ethical standards, provide ongoing education, and advocate for their members' interests, much like their medieval predecessors. While lacking the monopolies and direct political power of old, the underlying principle of a self-regulating body dedicated to the excellence and welfare of its practitioners remains. Finally, we can conclude our journey with a gentle image of the silent streets where these guilds once thrived. Though the bustling workshops have long since fallen silent and the vibrant processions no longer fill the thoroughfares, the physical remnants of their presence often endure. Imagine walking through the historic heart of an old European town. You might stumble upon a grand ancient building known as the Guild Hall, its stone facade weathered by centuries, perhaps still bearing a faded carving of a baker's shovel or a tailor's shears above its imposing doorway. These silent structures, now often museums, civic buildings, or even modern shops, stand as poignant reminders of a bygone age. The very layout of many old city centres, with their distinct craft quarters, areas once dominated by particular trades, such as Butcher Street or Goldsmiths Row, are living testaments to the guild system's organisational power. These ancient designations whisper stories of a time when every street corner hummed with the specific sounds and smells of a specialised craft. The quiet memory of communal life, of shared purpose, and of the rhythmic toil of skilled hands shaping raw materials lingers in these historic spaces. The medieval guilds, with their intricate systems of apprenticeship and mastership, their powerful monopolies, their hidden rituals, and their eventual decline, offer a fascinating glimpse into the complex social and economic structures of a distant past. They were a testament to human ingenuity in creating order from nascent chaos, and to the enduring desire for community, security, and the mastery of a craft. Their story is a quiet echo, a gentle murmur of industriousness and brotherhood from the annals of time. As the last lingering notes of the distant bell fade and the final whispers of the ancient trumpet dissipate into the quiet air, allow yourself to drift further into repose. The intricate details of medieval life, the sounds of hammers and looms, the murmur of ancient oaths, now recede into the soft shadows of memory. There is only the stillness and the gentle, persistent hum, inviting you deeper into quiet rest, knowing that even in sleep, the echoes of history softly resonate.